Hello there. So today we are going to talk about one of the open source project called CFSSL. It's coming from Cloudflare side. They are using it as a PKI toolkit. Originally, it was $4 certificate bundling, but it can also be used for certificate authority purpose. Like we can set up a certificate authority infrastructure, a PKI infrastructure using CFSL. And the good thing is that Cloudflare itself is using CFSL for their PKI requirements. So that makes it a promising open source project that we can use for PKI requirement. And using CFSL, we can easily set up a public key infra or a PKI infrastructure for our needs. So we'll talk about what exactly we are going to use the CFSL for. So let's say, let me switch to, all right. So this is what we are going to create using CFSL. So we will first set up a root certificate authority, which is going to be a self-signed one. And then we will set up a intermediate certificate authority, one for client, one for server, and they both will be signed from the root CA. So our root CA will sign these intermediate certificate authorities, and then we'll learn how to get the leaf certificate issued from these intermediate CAs for client and server. And you can think of the chain of trust, like leaf would be issued from the intermediate and intermediate would be issued from the root. So this would be the chain of trust for the certificates. All right, so let's jump into the CFSL environment. So I've already installed CFSL, so that's there on my local. I've created 3 different folders there to manage each individual certificate authority, one for root and 2 for intermediates, one for client intermediate, another one for server intermediate. Now, what we would need a JSON file that would basically help us get the CSR created. Here we would simply define the CN key, which is nothing but your algorithm and key size and subject attributes and the validity for that particular certificate or certificate authority, right? So I have placed a JSON file under each folder for specifically for each type of requirement, one for root and similarly for the intermediates one. And similarly, we would need for client and server as well. So I'm calling it as demo client 1 and the rest of similar properties. Equally, when I'm getting a server certificate issued, I would have a JSON for server, which would simply say that I'm requesting a server certificate for localhost with all these properties, right? And we would also need one more thing. So when we are creating the certificate from intermediate CA, we would need to provide profiles. And in a very basic terms, profile is nothing but like providing the information about the certificate, like what it is going to be used as, for what purposes. So simply, let's say we have created multiple profiles there in one single file. Let's say one for intermediate CA, uses are like cert signing and server auth and client auth. We would see mainly it for the certificate signing, but let's use the all there, right? And what's the validity for it? And yeah, it's a CA, so the flag is true. Similarly, we have profiles for server and client, so that's something that we are going to use here. And just to make it easy and quick, I have written a few basic steps there just for our reference, what we are going to do there. So first we need to set up a root certificate authority. It's going to be a self-signed one. We don't need to get it signed from anywhere else. So let's jump into the folder for root. Yeah. And we need to use this thing cfsl gen key hyphen initialization of CA, and we need to pass the JSON, and should be that's it. We'll check if we need to pass anything else. What do we need to call it as? Demo root CA. So basically, when we are specifying the name with the bear, we are telling that we would need to create the files with this prefix. Let's see if we need to pass anything else. Yeah, that's it. So let's create it. So you can see it has created a CSR and has signed it because it's going to be a self-signed one. So let's see, what do we see there in the root CA? Yeah, we got a certificate. We can decode it. Let's see, how does it look like? Yeah, so it's issued for demo root CA, and who has issued it? Again, demo root CA, because it's a self-signed one. So that looks okay for our root certificate authority need. We are good with the root CA. Let's set up the client intermediate CA, which is going to be demo client. And first we need to create a CSR, and then we need to get it signed from the root CA. So those are going to be our steps there. First, let's use CFSL gensert init CA, and need to pass the JSON. What else? That's it. CFSL JSON hyphen bear, what we are calling it as demo client int CA. That should be it. Let's see. Yep, so it has created a CSR for us and also a key and certificate, right? With the prefix that we have provided to it. Now, as the next step, we need to pass this CSR to the root CA to get it signed, because we are setting up an intermediate CA that should be signed from the root CA, right? So for that, we need to sign it with the root CA private key. And how to do that? Using CFSL sign, we need to pass the CA certificate. It's going to be the root certificate authority certificate. Let me pass the demo root and the certificate for it, pem file, and then we need to pass the key which will be signing this certificate. So it's going to be root CA key, and name of the key should be a key.pem. What else? We would need to pass config and profile. So let's pass config, which is nothing but the file that we created as profiles setting outside profiles.json, and they need to specify which specific profile. So it's an intermediate CA. So we need to pass intermediate CA profile name. What else? We also need to pass the CSR, which we want to get signed from the root. So yeah, that's one. And then CFSL JSON hyphen bear, and we want to name it as demo client and CA. Yep, so it has signed the certificate with root CA private key. So we should be getting a certificate signed from the root. Let's decode it again to see how does it look like. So we got this certificate for demo client intermediate CA, and it's issued from root CA, which looks okay. So now set up the server intermediate certificate authority with the same approach. So first we need to create the CSR. We know how to do that. CFSL gensert. We need to initialize the CA. We need to pass the JSON and CFSL JSON hyphen bear and name of the prefix, or basically the prefix with that it will create those files. So you want to create demo server int CA, should be. So it has created the CSR along with certificate and key. Now we need to pass the CSR, or basically the certificate, to the root CA to get it signed from the root CA private key. So let's do that. CFSL sign The CA is going to be the root CA and certificate for it. And now the key, which is the root CA key, key.pam, and we would need to pass the profiles, the config, which is profiles.json, and then with specific profile, it's going to be an intermediate CA, yep, and then the CSR that we need to get signed from the root. So that's the CSR. That should be it. -bear and the name of it. So it's going to be demo client, sorry, demo server this time, and CA. Yep. So we have got a certificate signed from the root for the server intermediate CA. Let's decode this one as well. Okay, still decoding. Yep. So we got a server intermediate CA certificate issued from the root. That's exactly what we needed. So with that, now we have a working root certificate authority and two intermediate certificate authorities for us, right? Now we need to issue the leaf certificate, one for the client and one for server. So again, the approach is going to be the same. We need to use gensert and then get it signed from the one of the intermediate CA. So let's do that. CFSL gensert. First, let's create a client leaf certificate. So it's going to be demo client and then public key or the certificate for it and the private key from there, demo client and CA and private key, and probably we need to pass config, which is profiles.json with specific profile. It's a client one, so client, and then what else? The JSON for the CSR, I believe. Yeah, so we need to pass the demo client JSON that we have, and then CFSL JSON -bear. What do we want to call it as? Demo client one, probably. Let's hit that. Yep, so it has created, where is that? Demo client certificate for us. Let's decode that, how that looks like. Yep, so we got a certificate issued from demo client one. This time it's coming from intermediate CA. So that's exactly what we needed. We needed to get a leaf certificate from intermediate CA, and we know this intermediate CA is further signed from the root CA that we have there, demo root CA. All right, so similarly, we need to get a server certificate as well, server leaf certificate. Let's do that as well. So it's going to be CFSL gensert CA. This time it's going to be demo server root CA. Sorry, demo server init CA, intermediate CA, and then the certificate for it, and then key for it, demo server, and name of the key, which should be key.pam. Config is profiles.json with specific profile. This time it's going to be server, and then the JSON for server. and then CFSL JSON hyphen bear. We would call it as demo server 1. Let's see. Yeah. So it has created a server leaf certificate for us. Let's check. Yep. We got a certificate created for localhost because that's the CN that we provided there in the JSON, and it's coming from the server intermediate CA. So that's all correct. So now with that, we have achieved setting up the root CA and intermediate CA, and we have also got leaf certificate issued for client and certificate. So that's all we wanted to explore with CFSL, like using CFSL, how we can set up a working PKI infrastructure. Now, in one of the next discussion, we would use this leaf certificate to play around the MTLS, like how we can play around MTLS using this client and server certificate so the MTLS scenario can be tested out. But specific to the CFSL, this is all what we wanted to test out. In this particular one, we used CFSL as a local using over the command line. Probably in some other discussion, we would also explore it, how to set it up as a remote server so we can interact with the CFSL over APIs. Yep, that's all. Thank you all.